Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the Experts here on City News 570. I'm joined today by Faisal Susiwala, recently named as the #1 REMAX agent worldwide in terms of sales volume and numbers of homes sold in 2023. Congratulations, Faisal. That's hats off to you for that one.
Thank you very much, Brock. I appreciate that.
Listeners, if you're interested in any of the information we discuss over the next hour, please reach out to Faisal. You can start your journey at homeshack.com. You can call him directly, 519-624-5555, or by email, Faisal at homeshack.com. So, Faisal, last week, the Bank of Canada stands pat. We talked a bit about that back in March, and that was your suggestion that you figured was going to be happening. What does it mean for the market if we take a look at it maybe locally and maybe nationally as well too? What do we see happening in the next little while?
Well, definitely a positive uptick in the market. And I wish Bank of Canada would take all my suggestions to heart and suggesting that they do. But they don't seem to care what I think. They just beat to their own drum here. But I will say that I'm happy to see that they have stopped, fear mongering and at least they've paused the rate increase. Now, what I will say is that they're slow in decreasing the rates, which only concerns me a little bit. So they've indicated that June will be the first rate cut, which is good, but it might be too little too late. And they might be chasing further rate cuts consistently and more rate cuts. So it would be nice, in my opinion, to see a rate cut a 0.25% at least in May, and then another 0.25% in June, as opposed to waiting until June and then having consecutive rate cuts coming down the pipe, because that just doesn't fit well with the economy. There could be a lot of fallout from that. And let's face it, a lot of mortgage renewals are coming due August, September, because
Right.
most people would have bought in May, June, July, closed 60 to 90 days out. Back in 2019, their 5-year rate is up now. They may be at 2.8 to 3.2. They'll be renewing at 5.5 to 6. So the impact on that is for the average homeowner who has a six to $700,000 mortgage, anywhere from $1,500 to $1,800 more payment per month.
Right.
And if we want to keep people in their homes for the next 12 months while rates continue to decrease, then I think a cut is warranted sooner rather than later. And we've talked about this in the past, Brock, that the whole Bank of Canada movement to increase rates was very rapid, and it was an overcorrection. They went too far, and now they're going to have to reverse those motions. And again, not being an economist, I can't really say what the reasoning was, but it wasn't working. And they could say all they want about that's what caused the inflation numbers to come down. But there's a whole other aspect of things that have gone on with these inflation numbers that people have had to stop spending, but just using mortgages as the only tool to reduce inflation, I think was an overshooting by the government.
And and we don't, as you said, it's not really, going down that path of fear mongering, but that idea of if your mortgage is coming up and it's a 5-year mortgage that you signed up for back in 2019, there is going to be some sticker shock. And as you've said before, it might be a good idea if you're going to be renewing to maybe renew for 1 or 2 years and let the market correct a little bit more. But in that short term, you are going to have to tighten your belt and you're going to have to maybe put some things on the back burner.
Yeah, and the challenge is that a 0.25% reduction, although it will ramp the market up and buyers who have been sitting on the sidelines may feel, okay, this is a good time to jump in because rates are starting to come down, and they'll have 60 or 90-day runway here to get into the market at lower rates and continue seeing lower rates. That 0.25% drop isn't going to put that much of a dent in someone who was paying 2.8% and they're now renewing at 5.8. Is even if it's at 5.6 or 5.5, it's still increasing their monthly obligations significantly. And that's where my concerns are right now. lengthening the amortization, having those conversations with your bank sooner rather than later is always advisable. You don't want to be last minute shopping for a mortgage or a rate renewal or any of that. So really get ahead of it if you can, and look at your options now.
And I know you'd said that you're not an economist, but those numbers of 2.8%, 2.9% when it comes to a mortgage, do you see us getting back to that at some point? Is that within the the next couple of years, or is that kind of pie in the sky thinking right now?
I think we're going to average out somewhere in the high threes, low fours. I cannot see our rates sub 3%. And if it does happen, we've already seen what happens. The rates go down to that level, prices are going to increase. And I would say for every 0.5% decrease in interest rate, we could see up to 10% increase in property values.
Right.
So again, is that sustainable? Are we going to create that same boom and urgency to buy because of the rates going down? So there has to be somewhat of a balance here.
Right. And it's always a good idea to have those conversations and take a look at, where are we right now? And we know
Yes.
that we talk 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, but it is a good idea to take a look at things right now. When it comes to real estate and taxes, what are really the key things that listeners should be paying attention to this time of the year?
So yeah, we're obviously doing our taxes now, and we've got to submit them before the deadlines. My focus right now in advising my clients is to ensure that you're doing the right things, you're doing it legally above board, so that you don't get into trouble with the CRA, because the amount of aggravation you could go through and the cost that you could go through, it's just going to overwhelm you, and you don't need that in your life. So avoid anything that's going to cause some grief to you, because CRA right now has been focusing since 2015, I should say, on real estate transactions and real estate interaction filings. They have collected $2.7 billion in additional taxes, or at least they've levied the fines and penalties up to 2.7 billion since 2015 to 2023. And the areas that they're really focusing on is not reporting income
Right. Right.
that you're claiming. And so, for example, if you're only claiming, let's say, $35,000 annual income, and you're living in a $2 million home and driving $200,000 worth of cars, that lifestyle does not match the income.
Right. Right. There's
Therefore,
some red flags.
exactly. Now you're a prime candidate to be audited. And it's your neighbors that are going to report you. And it's the people that are in your community that are going to say, this guy, he's driving around in a Mercedes, and he lives in a $2 million home. And I know he doesn't pay any taxes. So that's a big concern. And the government loves to hear from your neighbors, so they can audit. The other thing that they're going to look at is flipping. So when it comes to someone who is flipping on a regular basis, the government may look at you as someone who is using that as a business, and that is now income. It's not capital gains. So your tax base is going to be based on 53%, depending on your income bracket, as opposed to 26%. Again, not an accountant, so talk to your accountant about these numbers, but it's almost double what your tax rate would be if it was capital gains. So if you're doing this on a regular basis, you're now in the business of flipping, therefore you can't get capital gains. If you're selling your real estate and you're not reporting the capital gain again, you're a prime candidate. If you are receiving, many people have started investing, and we talked about this about investing in south of the border, in places like Florida or New York or wherever it may be, and you're earning income, or you're earning profits from sales, and you're not reporting what's called world income. Again, you're a prime candidate for an audit. And with new home purchases, that's a big thing. We've talked about HSBC, that type of thing. If you're planning on purchasing a home and you don't plan on residing in that home and you're using it as an investment vehicle, there's a whole other rule on HST and GST that becomes payable. So you have to ensure that you are getting tax advice on whether or not it's principal residence, or if you're buying a rental, is there going to be a rebate on the HST or not? So all of these things are very, very important. And then again, if you're in the business of building homes and selling homes, you're really a builder or land developer. You're no longer considered investor. So again, it comes down to whether it's income or gains. So make sure you define that with your accountant. Give your accountant the full scenario so that you're not caught in a situation where you questioned.
All right, good information, and you know, Faisal gives it to us straight and says, "Look, you got to do your homework." You know what? We are coming to the end of the first segment. Lots of other things that we want to talk about right now, but we will take a break. Karen asked the experts. When we come back, the do's and don'ts of open houses. Stay with us here on City News 570. Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Faisal Susiwala, recently named as the #1 REMAX agent worldwide in terms of sales volume and number of homes sold in 2023. He's also the author of the book, The Real Deal, Billion-Dollar Real Estate Broker. Listeners, if you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, you can always start by going to homeshack.com. You can call Faisal directly as well, 524-5555, or through email, Faisal@homeshack.com. Faisal, it's that time of the year. We're out for a drive. We see what's going on, and all of a sudden, these open houses are popping up everywhere. You've been at this for a while now. In your mind, do open houses work, or is it still something in this day and age that we need to have in order to make those sales?
Well, I can say to you that in 35 years that I've been in the business, in the last 25 years, I have not done an open house. And
Ah, okay.
I'll tell you why, because we as realtors have been coached our entire careers to do open houses, because the open house is a vehicle or an outlet for us to market ourselves, to meet nosy neighbors, to meet potential buyers coming into a home. And that seems to be a very relevant model for realtors to be using as a marketing tool for a seller's home. But I would argue that it actually doesn't work. I can understand if it's a new home site where you have a model or a sales center, and that's the only way. But you want qualified buyers, especially in today's day and age, with the security issues that we're having, with break-ins that we're having, with people stalking to see what you have in your home and coming back and robbing you, that night. Do you really want strangers walking through your home? Do you really want a realtor sitting at the kitchen island saying, wander through, and if you have any questions, come and see me? Now, Brock, how many times have you walked into an open house, or of people that have had open houses? I don't see the realtor hand-holding somebody through a home, pointing out things in an open house. But in an appointment scheduled viewing, where
Right.
you ask your realtor to show you a home, what do? They accompany you throughout the entire home. They show you the features of the home, but they're beside you. And it's not because they don't trust you, because that's the job to do
Right.
it. Now, if somebody decides to walk in on my home this Saturday afternoon or knocks on my door, am I going to let them say, well, wander through and have a look? And if you have any questions, I'm sitting at the table in the kitchen here, having my coffee and looking at TikTok videos. And that seems to be the trend that and realtors are going to hate me for saying this, but it's the truth.
That's
Because
okay.
we realtors have been using your homes as a retail outlet to promote ourselves. And I mean it when I say nosy neighbors.
Right.
When
Right.
I get a call from someone saying, when is the open house? My standard response is, it's in 20 minutes. You want to see it? My seller wants to show it.
Yeah.
I want to show it. They want to sell it. Why do you need to wait until Sunday 2 to 4 to
Right.
come through the phone? And that's when the person on the other end of the phone says, well, let me check with my wife. I'll get back to you. Because I knew it was a nosy neighbor talking to me when they can, walk through this home and ask questions and be nosy about why these people are selling. So I'm not so hard against open houses. I tell people as soon as I'm at their table listing their home that I will not do an open house. And if you're expecting me to do an open house, I'm not the right realtor for you because they just don't work. Serious buyers book appointments. They want the information. Serious agents qualify the buyer that's coming through your home. They determine whether or not they have been pre-approved. Is this to their liking? And you know, you as a seller have to go through a lot of steps to get your home ready,
Right.
to make it presentable. So you want qualified buyers walking through your home, not people that have nothing better to do on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. So my two
Yeah.
cents worth, I
That,
don't like.
and I think those are two valuable cents. I think the other thing is too, in this day and age, and I know that you take advantage of this as well. You've got drone cameras that can give you a shot of the whole property and what it looks like. And if someone really wants to see what the inside of the home looks like, there are videos that are there and lots of other ways that allow you to get a feel for it. And I like that idea of, yeah, if you're really wanting to come and see this place, let's make an appointment and come through and take a look. And as you've said before, it's always buyer buyer beware, or in this case, seller beware. Right? This is your home, and you're very cautious when it comes to who you want to have in there. So important to know that, and we still see those signs, and I'm sure that they do serve a purpose in some ways. But I also like that idea of being able to go and do your homework before you need to make that appointment, and start off by checking out homeshack.com. It's a great place to be. You'd sent me a story about this, and I was watching the response from the province as well. The city of Kitchener has now approved that 4 units can be built on these residential lots. Um, are we going back in time? I mean, I can remember fourplexes. That was something that was a kind of a 1960s or 1970s sort of thing. Is that what we're going back to, or is it going to look different this time around?
Well, I will say, first of all, like I can't say enough good things about the city of Kitchener for stepping up. Props to them for taking the initiative. Props to them for being the leader in this region in doing something that is going to put a dent in the crisis that we have. So again, and as you know, I've never been a real fan of the municipalities and the politicians that run the municipalities, but I gotta give credit where credit's due. So good on City of Kitchener. I hope Cambridge and Waterloo and the other municipalities are listening to this because they can learn a lot from the City of Kitchener here. The idea of 4 units may seem a little excessive, but it's going to create a relief in the housing situation. So where there are single detached lots, semi-detached lots, or townhomes that are freehold, where permission exists to build these, there is an opportunity right now to have, say, 3 units in the primary home. So you can
Mhm.
have a basement unit, a main floor unit, and an upper unit, plus a unit in your backyard, which could be another rental unit, or 2 units in the primary home and 2 units in your backyard in a detached unit. So there's so many different ways of creating these 4 units in a home. And as long as the parking meets the requirements, the land area meets the requirements, one could say, why not? Why not build this? This makes sense. The challenge is always going to be, is it too high density for that
Mhm.
lot? Is there enough green space? Is there enough parking? Is it turning into a parking lot? So I'm curious to see how this all rolls out. And I know that Doug Ford hasn't been a fan of this whole idea,
Right.
but it is needed. People are going to do it anyways. They're doing it illegally. So why not legalize it and make sure that safety follows? Because doing it illegally, having 3 units in a home and not having the proper safety, the fire connections, the water sprinkler systems, the drywall barriers that keep fire away, the doors that have self-closing devices. So all of these things will be implemented when it's a legal unit. So I think there's a great opportunity here for homeowners to be able to stay in their homes and not have to move out and have some income supplementing. I don't really see this as an investment vehicle where, buyers going to say, well, this is a great opportunity for me to have four rental units on. I see it more as an existing home owner who may be struggling or just doesn't need the amount of space that they have in their home. Maybe they're an empty nester. Perhaps they have a large home and they can downsize and they don't need the use of the entire home. So this is going to open up a lot of opportunities for people.
And there's been some discussion too about this idea of sort of like family compounds, and it's kind of an old world idea where the kids may live in one part and the grandparents live in another part, and it is one family unit, but they're making use of all of those spaces, and instead of having grandma and grandpa living in their apartment and your kids living somewhere else, you pull everyone together. It may not be for everybody, but it kind of speaks to that. And we talked a bit about this before, where there are people our age and they say, look, my parents looked after me when I was younger, and it's my turn now to look after them. And that's sort of that old world thinking. But I think it's also it meets the needs of a lot of people out there right now.
It really does.
Yeah, listen, we'll take a quick break. We'll get an update from the City News 570 News Center. When we come back, all you need to know about greener homes and how we're going to move forward on that as well, too. Stay with us here on City News 570. Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Faisal Susiwala, recently named as the #1 REMAX agent worldwide in terms of sales volume and number of homes sold in 2023. If you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, you can start by going to homeshack.com. You can call him directly, 519-624-5555, or email Faisal@homeshack.com. Before the show today, Faisal, you'd sent over some notes, and I did some digging around. The one thing that you had talked about was the idea of the Greener Homes program had shut down fairly quickly last month, and I think it left a lot of people sort of scrambling to find out what can we do and where can we go from here. You've managed to find someone who's stepping up to the plate and ready to sort of rescue the scenario. Maybe you can walk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I don't have all the details on it, but again, we're passing out compliments today. So my compliments to Enbridge for stepping in and picking up the Greener Homes program was abruptly shut down last month by the federal government, which left a lot of people who had now committed to doing these conversions and
Mhm.
making their homes greener. And then they were told, well, those grants will no longer be available. My understanding is it went from a $10,000 grant to a $5,000 grant for the greener homes. So Enbridge has now stepped in and they would cover the renovations up to the $10,000 for anyone who was already accepted in the government program. So if you heard about it's shutting down, it's important to look at who has stepped in to cover that and is still offering you the rebates or the grants available for the greener program. So there's a lot of that going on. I know Enbridge had other programs with appliances, with updating your insulation. So really investigate what is out there. And there's even more programs available to you if you are a senior. And we've talked about this in the past as well. It could be, you might have a freezer in the basement that is draining your electricity, and you can get into a higher efficiency freezer, air conditioning unit, furnace. So there's all kinds of incentives that are out there that you should be looking at, and just Google it, go onto the websites, look at your local utilities and see what they have to offer.
No, Faisal, too. Prior to the show, you'd sent some notes over outlining rapid growth when it comes to things such as prefabricated homes. And I guess the question is, why isn't Canada getting behind this idea more than, let's say, what's happening in other countries?
So a lot of it is independent companies throughout Ontario that are trying to get to market with prefab homes. The challenge is that they're very customized. So yes, you want a prefab home, but you still want to look good.
Right.
It might be complementing your existing home. So you don't want something that looks like a trailer sitting in your backyard. So believe it or not, the design aspect and the customization aspect is almost overwhelming people to
Okay.
a point where it's like, okay, there's just too much going on here. I can't do this, therefore I'm not going to build it, period. So these are some of the reasons. So my understanding is that the government of Canada is looking at options in how they can make this a little bit more streamlined, make it more accessible, and not create a situation for these smaller businesses where it's difficult for them. Because if you talk to a prefab company, many of them are saying that it's actually simpler for us just to come in and make a traditional pour a foundation, frame it on site, put the roof on, and build it the way you want. Because outfitting a plant, a factory, to create all of this, and then getting into customization,
Right.
it would be cost prohibitive. So you need almost a catalog, like picking, basically choosing a vehicle and saying, okay, I want this color, I want this type of wheel, and I want these features, and here are the options, pick it. So basically plug and play. And if we go back to the post-war, 1940s to 1960, the government of Canada actually had a catalog. And we know it as wartime homes. We also call it victory houses or strawberry box homes because they look like
Right.
strawberry cartons. But interestingly enough, there are subdivisions throughout our region where you can drive through and you see these story and a half homes where there's a one bedroom on the main floor, there's a bathroom on the main floor, a living room and a dining room or a kitchen, and there's two bedrooms upstairs. So there's not even in some of them, they may have retrofitted to have a second bathroom upstairs, but most of them, and the basements were not dug out, they were just basically 3 or 4 foot foundation, and you had a dirt basement, and a lot of people have retrofitted, dug out the basements. But there are subdivisions where you say, and they don't look that bad. People have improved them, added some gardening and landscaping, and it creates a very nice subdivision. So if the government would be able to come up with something similar in creation of a catalog to say, okay, here are the prefab options that are available. It will create consistency throughout. And look, a lot of these subdivisions that we see now are very much cookie cutter, as we like to call it in our industry. And they turn out well because you can pick your brick or your siding and whatnot. So it would be interesting to see if there's an option for the government to step in at this point, create that catalog like they did in the 1940s and 1960s, post-war, and create that wartime home, but call it, I wouldn't want to call it a crisis home, but it's to combat the housing crisis that we're facing now.
And I think that there's been similar projects, maybe in smaller countries like Finland and so on, where the government has actually said we are the ones to build these homes, not just we're going to make it available to businesses to do this, but the government actually steps in. I don't think the Canadian government is willing to do that, but if you're looking at this idea of something similar to what was there back, as you said, in the 40s and 50s and 60s, what needs to change in a lot of ways is what we're sort of taught is what to be expecting in your home. Is it it's gabled roofs and it's 2 stories and it's got the picket fence and so on. Where we're in the crisis where we need to have a roof over our heads and 4 walls and a bath and a kitchen and those kinds of things, and we need to be able to provide those things. It's going to take some time to change sort of our own ideas as to what that looks like.
Yeah, and it is a function of the private sector coming together with the government and saying, okay, how can we create this catalog? How can we get these homes built fast and get them on properties? And again, municipalities have to be on side to send these approvals out as well.
And hopefully we're heading in the right direction. And as we were just talking about a little while ago, that idea of the 4 units on one space, we've got to look at different ways of doing those things as well too. If we shift gears a little bit for the next few minutes, there was an article that came out at the end of March where I think it was 30,000 landlords here in the province had gone to and they want a simple solution when it comes to the landlord and tenant board. And maybe you can walk us through that as well too.
Yeah, and landlord tenant board is a prime example of failed government agencies that have no concept of what they are doing, unfortunately. And in a situation where 27%, almost 27% of homes are owned by investors, if these investors don't have the support from the government
Mhm.
to enforce rental payments, what are landlords going to do?
Right.
Landlords are going to say, I don't want to own rental properties anymore. Therefore, I'm going to sell these properties, and these tenants are going to be out on the street, literally out on the street, because they're not paying their rent. They're using the fact that it takes 8 to 9 months, sometimes a year or more, to get in front of the landlord tenant board for them to then only say, well, let's try to work out a solution here for a delinquent tenant. And again, I'm not against tenants, but I'm against people who don't pay their bills.
Right.
If I don't pay my bank my mortgage payment every month on time, I'm going to get very expensive notices from the bank's lawyers from
Right.
base Toronto that start at somewhere around $2,500 for the first notice. Landlords don't have those vehicles. Landlords don't have those options to say there will be consequences for you making late payments, for you making no payments, for you just thinking you can stay here for 9 months. And landlords are saying, well, it's time for us to exit because
Right.
we don't
Right.
have any recourse against these tenants who are using the system, circumventing in any way they can to create free housing for themselves. And what does the landlord need to do? They need to increase rents on other properties to make it's still a business. And it's 27% of home ownership in this region is by investors who are creating housing. So you can hate your landlord all you want, but if your landlord didn't save the money, didn't work hard,
Yeah.
didn't put their down payment down, didn't go and get a mortgage, put themselves at risk, you would not be enjoying the home that you're living in. So please pay your rent. If you pay your rent, your landlord's not going to sell your property, and pay it on time because your landlord also has to pay their mortgage on time.
Yeah.
So 30,000 landlords in Ontario, and that number's probably increased significantly, have petitioned the Ford government to say, put some rules in, put some penalties in place,
Yeah.
help us collect what's due to us. These are not groups that are running charities. If the government is not prepared to create free housing for these tenants who wish not to pay, then at least enforce the tenants to pay their rent on time and to be mindful of what landlord rights are, because all the rights seem to be falling for the tenants at this point.
Good information, and important for us to be able to look at it from that point of view as well too. You know what? Let's take a final break here on Ask the Experts. When we come back, how many mortgages is too many? You're listening to Ask the Experts here on City News 570. Welcome back to the show. My guest today has been Faisal Susiwala, also known as the top real estate broker in the world for REMAX. Listeners, if you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, you can start by going to homeshack.com. You can also call Faisal directly, 519-624-5555, or through email, Faisal@homeshack.com. Faisal, before the break, we were talking about making sure that you do your dues. If you've got rent to pay your rent. If you've got a mortgage to pay your mortgage. You shared with me though another story about the idea of capping the number of mortgages that some folks might have. They're already carrying a high level of debt. Is this a new idea, or is it an old idea that just needs to be looked at again?
It's kind of an old
It's kind of an
idea.
old.
And it's also common sense. Like, don't expose yourself to excessive amount of debt, especially in times right now, and if you're buying rental properties, where you know that you could end up having 1, 2, 3 months of non-payment from a tenant or from
Right.
vacancy, whatever it may be. So can you handle that debt load? And if the answer is no, that if I miss my rent income this month, I'm going to miss my mortgage payment this month. That's not a situation you want to find yourself in. And let's say you find yourself in that situation 3 to 4 properties a month. If you've got too many properties in your portfolio that you know you cannot sustain making those payments. So there's some regulation that's being spoken of right now from the government side to say, do we put caps on this? And from the banking side, already many banks have done that, where they've said, if you already own X amount of properties, we can no longer fund you. We can no longer finance you. So what ends up happening is the borrower then goes to a private lender or B lender or some other format to find that mortgage. So there's rules that are sort of being implemented right now to say, okay, what is that cap going to be? What is the income level that you need to have in order to sustain 4 mortgages, 5 mortgages? And I heard, okay, if you're earning $100,000 a year, then there's a cap of 4.5 times your earning is what your potential purchase can be. So these are all things that are going to start coming down the pipeline, I believe, in the next 6 to 12 months. But just common sense prevails here. If you know you can't hold those properties vacant, or you can't afford to have missed more rental payments, then maybe that's the time. And the banks have already been in, for the most case, my understanding is 5 properties per bank, per
Okay.
institution is sort of the cap right now. In some instances, they'll make an exception if you're a high net worth client, or if you're a high income client, they may allow you to add 2, 3, 4 more properties. It also makes a difference whether you're holding them personally or if you're holding them in a corporation. So again, these conversations need to be had with your banker, with your accountant, with your lawyer, and make sure you yourself look at your lifestyle, your
Mhm.
spending habits, and say, well, okay, I can actually afford to miss 2 or 3 rental payments that are expected and still be able to pay my mortgage.
And really, when it comes down to it, a good night's sleep is priceless. If you can sleep at night and you're not worried about carrying 5 mortgages, more power to you. And you're right. You if you spread yourself too thin, you might think, oh, I'll be able to make it up over here, but it's a bit of a gamble, and um, be able to control those things, and know that you can sleep well at night. Always a good piece of advice. Another story that we had talked a bit about recently too, the lawsuit that had come up in the United States that was focused on price fixing when it comes to commissions. What in a situation like that, maybe you can give us the background to that, but also what would that have an impact on us here locally as well?
So the National Association of Real Estate in the US did a massive settlement with the private sector, basically, on fixing on commissions. And basically the gist of it was, and it was somewhere like, with, if you combine all of the lawsuits in the US, and the US is known for its massive class actions. It's going to be close to $2 billion worth of settlements that are going to happen in the US by the time everything is said and done. And the claim is that realtors in the US are price fixing. So whether it be 5% or 6%, and then they're paying the cooperating broker, so the buyer's agent, out of that commission. So it's deemed that as price fixing. In Canada, the difference here is that we don't have price fixing, if that's what they're claiming that we're doing. And there is a lawsuit that has just been initiated against the Canadian Real Estate Association, which I like to call a copycat lawsuit. It's very
Okay.
similar to the one in the US. But here's where there's holes in that argument, because we have, and I'm sure you've seen advertisements throughout this region and throughout Ontario or throughout Canada, where someone says, list your home for $999, or list your home for 1%, or list your home for
100%.
3%. So the claim that we're price fixing doesn't stand, in my opinion. The other thing is that they're saying that the buyer's agent should be compensated by the buyer.
Okay.
Now, that may sound great, and it would sound great to the seller, because if I come to your home right now, Brock, and I say my fee is 5%, out of that fee, I'm going to pay 2.5 or 3%, or whatever the number is, to the buyer's agent,
Mhm.
to motivate that buyer's agent to show your home. If I
Right.
say pay 0% to you, Mr. Buyer's agent or Mrs. Buyer's agent, that what is the motivation or the incentive for that buyer's agent to bring a client to your home?
Right.
So then that buyer's agent needs to turn to their buyer and say, you've identified a home on MLS that Faisal is selling, but
Yeah.
Faisal's not going to pay me to sell that home. You, the buyer, are under an obligation under a buyer representation agreement to pay compensation to me for spending time showing you homes, negotiating
Mhm.
the possible deal, and acting in your best interest. So my fee is now 2% or 2.5% of the purchase price. The buyer's going to look at the buyer's agent and say, hang on, I'm barely scraping together 5% to buy
Yeah.
this. You want me to come up with another 2% or 2.5% to pay your fee? So now I'm either going to self-represent or I'm going to get my lawyer to do the deal. I feel that at the end of the day, a seller is going to suffer as well because they're not going to get the traction. They're not going to get the bidding wars. They're not going to get the activity and the transactions happening on their home as a result of fewer people motivated to show their property. So, you got to be careful what you wish for.
Right.
And
Right.
you be careful with these class action lawsuits. But again, I can't for the life of me figure out how it relates to us in Canada because for as long as I can remember, there's been buyer representation agreements in place. It's already identified what the compensation is going to be and who's going to pay that compensation. The seller, when they list the home, they can choose to say, fine, Faisal, I'll pay you your 2.5%, but I'm not going to pay the buyer's broker, which is
Mm.
fair. But you have to incentivize buyers, agents to show your home. And if you're going to say it's
Right.
zero, you're going to have lack of activity. So again, it'd be interesting to see how Canadian Real Estate Association handles it, how they deal with the situation. But I feel it's very different than what happened with the National Association of Realtors in the
Right.
US. And I fail to see how anybody is price fixing in Canada. I haven't seen it yet.
And I think too, we've talked about this as well in the past, is that a real estate agent plays an extremely important role. This is the largest for most people. It's going to be the largest purchase you ever make, and unless you're an expert at it, uh, there's going to be so many things that you need to keep in mind. You won't have a good night's sleep if you're self representing in a lot of cases, and you're paying someone to do their job, and everyone else gets paid to do their job. So why would you try and scrimp and save on those things? I get it, especially if it's a $1 million or $2 million home, all of those things. But at the end of the day, unless you're a real estate agent yourself, you want, and that's why it's called Ask the Experts, folks. That's why we talk to Faisal to walk us through these things. And I think it's important for people to you don't want to scrimp on or try and save money on the most expensive venture that you might ever go into.
Yeah, no, and there are people out there who are extremely savvy, who have
Yeah.
an excellent handle on the market, and they know what they're talking about. And if you are one of those people, power to you, self-represent yourself, get a lawyer to write up the offers. But as a seller, I would be very careful in
Mhm.
engaging with someone who's self-representing. Do they have errors and omissions insurance? No, they
Right.
don't. What happens on closing? Who do I call when the buyer is not showing up on the day of closing with their certified check or bank
Yeah.
draft to close the deal? I have no recourse. Have I done my research? Did I find out if they were pre-qualified? Did I get all of that information in hand before I committed to selling my home and making plans moving forward? Because those funds are going to be needed in order for me to pay for the next house I'm buying. So there's a lot of variables here.
Exactly. Exactly. Faisal, I want to thank you again for coming on the show today. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and thanks for giving us some of your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on today, bro.
That was Faisal Susiwala, top real estate broker, recently published author as well of The Real Deal, billion-dollar real estate broker. And someone knows what he's talking about when it comes to real estate. And always a great chance to chat with him as well, too. Big thank you to our technical producer, Devin Robertson, for pushing all the right buttons. And thanks to you, listeners, for joining us. You've been listening to Ask the Experts here on City News 570.